So the first section on a GHS label is called the product identifier. And if you notice in this case, the name of this product, of this chemical, is N-propyl alcohol. It's just rubbing alcohol that we use, let's say if you get injured, to clean an injury. And the product identifier section should always match whatever's in the safety data sheet. Remember, I said the safety data sheet is a more lengthy document. It has actually 16 sections. And the label, the purpose of the label is so that if you can see the information quickly and without having to read all these documents. But again, it should match the safety data sheet. Section 2, which is right underneath the product identifier, is what we call a signal word. And there's two different words that you can see here. The first one is danger. If you see that word, it does mean that the danger is severe, that there's severe hazards associated to this chemical. On the other hand, if you see the signal word warning, that tells you that it's less severe. It still can pose a health hazard, but it's not as severe as danger signal word. If you see no signal word whatsoever, then that means that there's really no potential health hazards. But even if you don't see a signal word, you should always assume that the chemical is dangerous and proceed with caution. Right under the signal word is always going to be a statement, and this is going to be the hazard statement, meaning this is going to tell you what kind of dangers this chemical poses. What kind of, if it's flammable, if it can cause cancer, if it can cause nausea, whatever hazards it might have, that's what it's going to tell you. Right under it is going to be the precautionary statement. So this is also a statement, but this one's telling you how to prevent injuries, how to prevent accidents, what kind of protective gear to wear. For example, here it'll tell you if you should wear goggles, if you should wear gloves, if you should use it in a ventilated area. So those kind of statements are going to be the precautionary statements. And right under, you should see the supplier identification. It's usually at the very bottom of the label. And that one is included because if, let's say, there is an accident or there is exposure, then you can always call the manufacturer directly, meaning the company that made this chemical. And you can always ask questions about how to, if there's a spill, how to clean it, if someone got exposed, how to help them, and so on. First aid measures. So you can always call the supplier directly. And last but not least, the section of the pictograms. If you notice here, it's those symbols with red borders around them. And basically, these are very straightforward pictures telling you what kind of hazards this chemical poses. And in this case, if you notice, there's 3 of them. And we're going to go over the different pictograms right after I finish here and what they mean so that you're familiar with them. But in my opinion, most of them are very obvious where you should, when you see them, you should know exactly what they mean. But if you don't, then today you're going to learn. So any questions on the global harmonizing system labels?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Again, please make sure that you're highlighting, that you're underlining, so that the notes stand out. If not, let's say you're taking a quiz, and let's be realistic, it's not like it can stop you from you looking at your notes. So I'm basically telling you, do things to help you during a quiz so that you don't have to reread everything. Make things stand out that you think might come up on a quiz or a test. Okay? So let's go ahead and move on to the pictogram. So I'm going to show you a pictogram, and I'm going to have you try to guess what the name of it is. Because again, like I said, to me, most of them are obvious. There are a few that are not as obvious, but today we're going to learn what they're called. So let's begin with this one. And in your notebook, I have a table with the symbol and then an empty column for you to put the name, the correct name. Okay, so make sure that you're typing the correct name. So what do you think this one is called? There's the list of the names. Is this a compressed gas? Is this corrosive?
Is it a health hazard?
Correct, very good. It is, this represents a health hazard. So anytime you see this pictogram, this symbol, it's a person and then it looks like something happened on that person's chest. And that is to represent that it can affect your health. When you see this symbol, this basically can mean that it can cause you cancer. It can make you very ill. It can make you nauseous. It can make you vomit. So anything that is going to affect your health. So yes, this one's called health hazard. Let's move on to the second one. And I think a lot of you might have seen this one before. What do you think this one's called?
Hazardous.
Look at the list. I have there the list of all the names.
Is it toxic substance?
Correct. Toxic substance. So you see a bottle with this symbol on it, you know you should not smell it, taste it, or let it touch your skin because it might, if you're exposed to it, you might get so sick that you might even die. So that's why they have a skull here, because toxic substances can lead to death very, very quickly. So that's the second one, toxic substance. Let's move on to the third one. This one, in my opinion, is one of those that is not super obvious, but let's see if you guys can guess what this one's called.
Explosive?
Take a guess. I'm sorry?
No, wait.
I didn't
Irritant?
catch it. Irritant.
Yeah.
Very good. Yes, it's irritant. Very good. So this one, since it's not super obvious, if I were you, I would highlight it and make sure so that it stands out and you know, okay, when I see this exclamation point, it means that it's an irritant. Now, what does that mean? That means if it comes in contact with your skin or your eyes, for example, it might cause redness, an allergy reaction, or a rash. So that's what it means when it says irritant. Okay, it might get very itchy, cause dry skin, and so on. Let's move on to the next one. What do you think this one's called?
Corrosive.
Corrosive, very good. What does corrosive mean?
It can corrode through normal standard PPE.
Okay.
It's pretty acidic, I think.
Okay, that's all correct, Desi. And when you said the word, it can corrode away. Another word for that is it can eat away at not only things like tables, it can also corrode away or eat away at your skin, your soft tissue. So obviously you don't want it to touch your eyes, you don't want it to touch your skin because it can actually eat away and leave a hole in your soft tissue. Obviously you wouldn't want that to happen to your eyes, right? Because most likely you'll lose your vision. And Desi, you mentioned acids. Yes, there are a lot of acids, especially the strong ones, are very corrosive. So much so that this is the example that always comes to my mind. I don't know why, but it's something that I've heard. The drug cartels and all of that, when they want to dispose of a body and they don't want it to be found, they actually use acid to basically disintegrate the body because corrosive acids can just eat away at soft tissue.
Miss, are we supposed to write this down on the notebook?
You can just type the name. If let's say you didn't know what corrosive meant, then yes, type right really quick there. Corrosive means that it can eat away at tissue. Okay. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. The next one, what do you think it's called?
Flammable.
Flammable.
Flammable, very good. Yes, I think this one is one of the most obvious ones. You see a flame, it means that it's flammable. And again, the word flammable means that it can easily ignite into a fire if it's exposed to high temperatures or to a flame. And so obviously you don't want to have this type of substance near a source of heat. So to give you an example, the fuel that we put in our cars is highly flammable, ethanol. So you don't want to have any kind of source of heat close to your pump whenever you're pumping. And that's why they always say, don't use your cell phone because electric charges can actually ignite flammable materials, the fumes from the gasoline. And if you've ever pumped gas, it's a strong smell. And that's because as you're pumping, some of those vapors do escape from the pump. So you've got to be very careful with those flammable materials. Any questions before we move to the next one?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So this one is one of those that is not super obvious, but I think some of you might figure it out. What is this one called?
Explosion. I
Oxidizer.
believe it's oxidizer.
Yes, this is an oxidizer. And I think the big giveaway is the fact that there's a big O in the symbol. And then it has like little flames on top of it. So that O should give you the hint that this is an oxidizer. Now, does anyone know what an oxidizer is? Okay, let me give you a hint.
Is it like when it rusts?
Okay, yes, Nedved. So chemicals that are oxidizers can actually form rust because as they're exposed to oxygen, they react with the oxygen, right? Now, to be more precise, I want to show the example of a fire. What does a fire need in order to keep burning?
Wind.
Fuel.
I'm sorry?
Wind.
Oxygen?
Oxygen, wind, air, yes. So fires are fueled by oxygen. And if you remove the oxygen from a fire, you extinguish it. That's why in order to help a person that's on fire, you envelop them in a blanket because basically you're removing the oxygen from it. So when you say that a chemical is an oxidizer, basically this chemical provides more oxygen to a reaction. So if you put this kind of chemical close to a fire, what is it going to do? It's going to make the fire even stronger, even hotter because it's adding more oxygen to that reaction. So,
Miss, the name
yes.
of that?
I'm sorry?
What's the name of that symbol?
Oxidizer. Sorry, I hadn't put the, yes, oxidizer. So any chemical that is labeled as an oxidizer, you always want to keep away from fire because they will make that fire much worse, much stronger. An example would be chlorine, like the chlorine that we use for pools. If let's say you have a pool in your house and you use chlorine to keep it clean, if God forbid there was a fire in your house and it reached that chlorine would actually make the fire worse because it would make the reaction happen faster. So that's an oxidizer. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. What do you think this one's called?
Explosion.
Explosive. Very good. I think this one is one of the most obvious ones. And if you see this symbol by a label in a chemical, it basically tells you if you put it under pressure or if you put it under high temperatures, this chemical might explode. The easiest example I can think of would be fireworks. Fireworks can be, if you look at the side of the packaging, you'll see that it has these labels. They have to do it by law. And if they're not stored properly, they can explode. There has been incidents, for example, the one that I can remember in Mexico, a factory in Mexico, that unfortunately they weren't storing the fireworks correctly and it exploded. And I think it like took out like 2 or 3 blocks radius around it. So which is very unfortunate. So that's what an explosive is. Excuse me. What do you think this one's called?
Compressed gas.
Very good. Compressed gas. Yes. There's whenever you put a gas under pressure, because gases want to expand, they want to take the room, they want to move, right? In order to contain a gas, you have to put it under high levels of pressure and then they put them in a can. Let me give you two examples that you might be familiar with. Hairspray, if you use hairspray, that is gas under pressure. Lysol, that is also gas under pressure. And if you ever were to read the labels on the back, you will see that it says somewhere, do not puncture and do not put on under high temperature, because when you puncture it, what might happen is you release the pressure and the gas just expands automatically and it basically explodes on you. And the same thing happens if you expose it to high temperatures. The higher the temperature, the more the pressure is going to build inside of that can. It's going to explode eventually. So that's the hazard with a compressed gas, that it can actually explode. Let's move on to the next one. What do you think this one's called?
Environmental hazard.
Environmental
Yes.
hazard.
Thank you, ladies. Environmental hazard. You see there dead fish, a very dry, dead tree. And this basically means that if this chemical is released into the environment, it's going to cause a lot of destruction, not only in the animals, but also in the plants. And it may contaminate the water, the soil. And if it contaminates water and soil, it can also make us sick. So there's a lot of companies, unfortunately, that they don't want to pay to properly dispose of waste, and a lot of times they release their chemical waste into the environment, and that's when we get a lot of contamination and a lot of things dying. An example where you might see a chemical that is an environmental hazard would be a pesticide. Let's say that you have a pest in your garden and you want to get rid of it, you use pesticide for it. Now, you have to use the right type of pesticide that is going to kill the pest, but not your plants, right? So you always have to be careful with the kind of chemicals that you use for that. So that's all 9. Any questions on the pictograms?
No, ma'am.
Okay, good. I think most of them are obvious. The ones that are not, like I said, I would highlight them so that they stand out and you start memorizing what they mean. Let's go ahead and move on to the last part of the lesson before you do your assignment. And that's going to be the NFPA diamond. And NFPA stands for National Fire Protection Association. And this is basically the association that came up with this symbol that we use to warn people of chemicals that might be stored in a room or that might be transported in a semi or that is being used. So have any of you seen this diamond somewhere when you're out and about?
No.
No?
Yes.
Yes? Where have you seen it?
Yes.
Yes? Tell me, where have you seen it?
Like in Home Depot when you're looking at machines and stuff.
Oh, very good. Where else? Someone else said they've seen it.
Gas canisters.
Okay, very good. Gas canisters. Like if you use propane for your grill, those propane canisters should have one. If you
fire extinguishers.
Yes, fire extinguishers as well. When you pump gas, there should be one somewhere around the pump. Next time you go, look for it, but it should be there. If you're driving down the road behind a semi that is transporting any kind of chemical, it should be posted on the back. I can tell you that because my dad is a truck driver and he actually has the license to be able to transport hazardous chemicals. And anytime he's transporting anything hazardous, he has to post this on the back of his truck, because if, let's say, God forbid, he got in an accident, first responders would need to know how to handle the chemical and how to help him and also how to protect themselves. So this diamond should be posted in a lot of places. I think a lot of us just don't notice it, but it is in a lot of places. Here in school, a lot of times if you walk past the storage rooms where the custodians keep their things, a lot of times you will see one in the door because they do have hazardous materials in there. Now, I just want to kind of make you aware that this is out there. It's just a lot of cases we're not aware of it. We just don't pay attention, but it is out. So let's go ahead and discuss it, how to read it, how to use it. If you notice, there's 4 sections here. There's a red section, a blue one, a yellow one, and a white one. So I want to begin with the red one. I think most of us do associate red with fire. So this one is the one for flammability, meaning how flammable the chemical is or not. And if you notice, there's numbers that are used within that section. The lower the number, then the less flammable the chemical is. The higher the number, then the more flammable it is. And there it does explain to you what a 0 means, what a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So let's say that you saw a 3 in that section. What would that mean? Would you say that this is not flammable or somewhat flammable?
It's mildly
That
flammable.
it can be ignited.
Yes, it can be easily ignited. Not as easy as a number 4, but if you saw this, you would want to be very careful and not put it close to a flame and make sure that it's handled correctly, right? And make sure that you have a fire extinguisher nearby in case it does ignite. If you saw it empty, let me go back. If you saw it like that, empty, then what can you assume if it's completely empty?
It is the safest material on Earth.
Well, it means that there's no flammability hazard. So a lot of times you won't see a 0, they'll just leave it blank. So you can assume that if it's blank, that there's no risk of flammability in this case. Okay, let's move on to the blue one, which is the one for health. And in this section, obviously, the higher the number, the more hazardous this chemical is to your health if you're exposed to it. So obviously, if you see a number 4, you definitely don't want to be exposed to it where you're going to inhale it or you're going to ingest it or it's going to touch your skin in some way. Because if you notice, a number 4 says that it can be lethal. So is that information that needs to have when handling the chemical? Definitely, right? I would personally say no, someone else to do it. I'm not touching, I'm not going near that if it's a 4. But let's say it's a 2. If you notice in the reading here, it says it can cause temporary incapacitation or residual injury, meaning it could make you faint. It could make you vomit, make you nauseous. It could give you a headache. Things like that that are temporary, are not going to last forever. But if, let's say, if it was higher, like a 3, that would be something that, for example, if you're exposed to it, it could actually give you cancer, or it could actually trigger some kind of illness in your body. So obviously, you got to be very careful. The higher the number it is. So let's move on to the yellow section. This one is basically telling you how stable or unstable a chemical is. Obviously, the more unstable, the more likely it is to react violently, and that can lead to fire, that can lead to explosions, that can lead to very violent reactions. So the higher the number you see in the yellow section, then the more dangerous it is, the more unstable it is. And obviously, you want to handle it with care. If you notice here on number 4, it says it may explode at normal temperatures and pressures. So if you saw number 4 on the chemical, this would be the chemical that you would need to store in some, like in a fridge where it's cold and where you can keep the pressure low. If you saw it blank like it is right now, then you can assume that it's stable and it doesn't need any special treatment. If you saw number 1, it tells you it's normally stable, but you don't want to expose it to high temperatures because it might make it unstable. And last but not least, the white section. This one is for special hazards, meaning hazards that are not covered by the flammability, the health, or the instability. And there's different options. And if you notice there, you could see if it's alkaline, if it's acidic, if it's corrosive, if it's oxidizing, if it's radioactive. Does anyone know what radioactive means? If something is radioactive? No?
It can cause cancer.
Okay, yes.
Or it
So
can lead to
most
cancer.
it can lead to cancer. Yes, thank you, Jackie. Very, very good. Radioactive materials are materials that are very unstable, so they start to decay. And when a material decays, it releases particles like alpha particles. And those kind of particles, when they come in contact with humans or animals, it can actually affect your cells, and it can start to produce cancerous cells. So yes, that's why radioactivity is always associated with cancer.
It can also cause deformities, no?
Yes. So let's say, for example, you are pregnant and you're exposed to a radioactive material. It can actually cause deformities on your baby, unfortunately. It can actually affect your DNA to where that's why some of your cells start developing cancer, because your DNA was affected. That's how deep radioactive materials can affect you. So I don't know if you guys have heard of, there was an accident in Chernobyl, which is close to Russia. And this was, I think, back in the 70s, where there was an accident. Yes?
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s. And I think HBO did a series on Chernobyl. I think it's titled Chernobyl. If you guys haven't seen it, watch it. It's kind of gruesome because it is true. That's exactly what happened. And pretty much anyone that lived in that city, because basically it was a nuclear power plant that got out of control. So they couldn't control the reaction. So basically everything started decaying, releasing a lot of radioactivity into the town. So a lot of people, if they didn't die just from the exposure, they got severely burned, or they got cancer years later. So it was, I mean, being exposed to that level of radioactivity, a lot of people were very affected. So that's radioactive materials. The W with a line across it tells you that this material cannot be exposed to water because it will react violently with water. There are chemicals that, if touched by water, they ignite into fire or they explode. And the last one, a W with a line plus an OX. That means it reacts violently and explosively, and it can oxidize as well. So if you saw an OX, that tells you this is an oxidizer. Any questions here before I let you go onto your assignment?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Make sure that if you want to, go ahead in your notebook, put numbers like I did here as an example, so that you know what it will look like. Normally, when you do see a diamond, it's not going to have these labels that I have on the side for you. So you, just as long as you know that the higher the number, the more risk it poses. Okay. So that's the end of our lecture for today. The rest of the period I'm going to give to you to complete the assignment on GHS labels, pictograms, and Nfpa diamonds. And then if you finish early, what I want you to do is make sure that you finished every assignment that we did this week, which was the one for Tuesday, the getting to know you activity. If you haven't completed that one, please complete it. The getting your syllabus and your contract signed by you and your parents. If you haven't done that, get it done, please. And then the 6 Ed Puzzle videos that you should have done in the last 2 days. If you haven't finished them, please finish them. Like I said, I like on Fridays, I like to grade everything that's been done. That way you know exactly what your grade in class is. So any questions before I give you the assignment? Okay. Let me show you again. This assignment has not been released either. I'm going to go ahead and release it for you. We're here. Instructions. Classwork. So we're in week 1, and this is the assignment. I'm going to go ahead and release it to you guys. Okay, so I'll be here go ahead and do everything you need to do. If you finish and you want to leave so that you can complete work for another class, just let me know before you leave. Okay, you can put it in the chat or you can tell me by unmuting yourself. Okay, so go ahead and get started on your assignment.